very welcome to the weekly meeting of the ERA Committee, and indeed to anybody who is watching in. You two are equally welcome. As we know, the meeting will be recorded online and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings, and you can use mobile devices as long as you're in airplane mode and all devices are muted. I don't have any apologies down here at the minute, and under Chairperson's business, there was a number of queries on the organic egg sector. We'll recall that at the committee we sought clarity from the department in October on a number of matters relating to the organic egg sector and protocol applications industry. The department has advised that it is continuing to engage with the UFU, DEFRA and the poultry industry, and has assured us that it will provide an update in due course. Okay. Members, the other thing that... sorry, go ahead, Rosemary.
Excuse me. Yes, sorry to interrupt you,
Go ahead,
Chair.
yeah.
Chair, this is from, you said it's from October, yeah, that the department have been asked about this organic egg sector. Surely it's time we were getting something a little bit more definitive.
Yeah.
That is continual engagement.
Yeah, somewhere, yeah, exactly, Rosemary, and that's probably 3 months now. Should we maybe highlight our concerns with the department?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Chair, yes, indeed. For the record, we'll seek a definitive deadline for the return on those queries and ask for it to be as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Happy now. Members, the other thing that I want to perhaps suggest to the committee as well, you will note that the future agriculture policy was launched just before, a few days before Christmas there in December, with a 6 weeks consultation period. Given the absolute seriousness and the importance of this policy, I think it would be in order if we perhaps asked the department would they consider extending that consultation period for a longer time, because it closes on the 15th of February, and obviously part of the consultation period was during the weeks over Christmas as well. So would members be agreeable if we could ask the department to consider extending that consultation, because typically you see consultations lasting 12 or 16 weeks. What members think of that? Okay.
Yeah, that's grand, sure. We don't have a problem with that. Yep, that'll be good.
Yep, thank you. Okay, members, and still under Chairperson's business, the 21 to 25 multi-year budget. We have been scheduled to have an oral briefing from the department today on both the 21 to 22 in-year budget and the budget for 22 to 25. However, the department hasn't provided information in relation to the 22 to 25 multi-year budget plans. As you may recall, we originally wrote the department on the 1st of October to request early sight of the 22 to 25 budget proposals after the Minister for Finance announced that this would be brought into effect. The department subsequently accepted an invitation to provide an oral briefing, which was scheduled on the forward work programme for today. The department advised the committee on Tuesday of this week that the officials would not be in a position to discuss the 22 to 25 budget and asked to defer the briefing. Therefore, while officials will be attending today to brief on the 21 to 22 budget, the department will not be providing commentary on the 3-year budget. Members, you will be aware that the committee has a duty to provide its views on the DERA's 3-year budget proposals in order to support the Committee for Finance's scrutiny of the budget. In order to do this, the department must provide a timely and thorough briefing. Unfortunately, the department has failed to meet its commitments in respect of the pre-arranged briefing today. I would suggest that we write to the department to express our discontent with the situation and to insist that papers and witnesses are provided as a matter of urgency. Nick, do you want to pick up on some of this?
Chair, thank you. Yes, just by way of clarity and remind members that the Department for Finance is undertaking a consultation exercise on the 22 to 25 multi-year budget proposals, and as part of that exercise, the Committee for Finance has written to all statutory committees asking them to make a return by the 18th of February in regards to their scrutiny of their respective departments' budget proposals, and it was in that context that we had requested the information to be provided in a briefing today to allow the committee adequate time to look at those proposals, especially given some of the fiscal pressures that are anticipated to be in the department's budget that the committee has discussed in previous weeks. We were advised this week that unfortunately the briefing would not be provided today, and I think it would be prudent to seek to have that briefing as quickly as possible. Chair.
Thank you. John?
Chair, thank you. Minded that this is a very serious matter, notwithstanding the cuts that are pending across departments and budgets and some of the very serious and high-profile issues that DAERA is expected to deal with, agriculture obviously, environment and climate action also. It worries me greatly that there should be any reduction in time of consideration of this committee of these matters relating to the budgets, and that delay is unavoidable given the pending end of the Assembly mandate. Could I ask, therefore, that would it useful to copy any correspondence to the Department of Finance to let them know that we might be limited in the time to consider their consultation?
Yep. Thank you, John. I'm sure that would be okay. William?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was there any specific reason given why they weren't in a position to bring forward the budgets for the 3-year period? Was any specific reason, or just said they weren't? Did they just say they weren't in a position to do that, or did they give any specific reason for the hold-up?
Chair, I wasn't provided with an exact reason about why the delay has come for. Early indications have been that they would have been in a position and had been planning to give the briefing today, but I understand that there may have been some internal delays within the department, but I'm not privy to the exact reasons for those just at the moment. It may be something we may wish the committee may be minded to ask for in its letter as to the rationale for the delay.
Yeah.
They didn't give an indication that, for instance, that they can give us that information next week? No, they didn't give it. Didn't give an indication as to when we will have the information.
Chair, I asked verbally counterparts in the department to strive to make that information available as soon as possible with a view to possibly facilitating the briefing next week, but was not provided with any definite assurance on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, members, item number 3 in the agenda is the draft minutes. It's page 6 of your pack. And members, okay if I sign this here? Okay. And there's no matters rising. Item number 5 is the consideration of the Climate Change number 2 Bill draft report. We will now review the amendments which have been made to the committee's draft report on Climate Change number 2 Bill. As you recall, last Thursday we agreed in principle some changes to the reports which have been amended and circulated to members via email and are included in today's pack at page 26. I also like to advise members that the request for legal advice on issues raised last Thursday has been submitted in order to help inform committee members at the next legislative phase. This will be provided for members once the Legal Services Office has reported on the request. I refer members to the draft report at page 26 of your meeting pack. 6. Okay, members. Right, the changes which have been made following last week's meeting are as follows. A point under paragraph 10 has been removed, which is page 30 of your pack. Paragraph 79 has been amended to make it clear the comments were made by DAERA officials. Some amendments have been made to members' views on clauses 1 to 3, as page 100 to 102 of the pack. An amendment has been made to the members' comment on clause 22, that's page 109 of your pack. An amendment has been made to members' comment on clause 28A, and that's 112 of your packs. An amendment has been made to the members' comment on clause 39, which is page 114 of your pack. A new recommendation has been added regarding development of an operational policy by DAERA in respect of clause 31, and that's page 116 of your packs. Okay, members? Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Claire?
Sorry, can I add 2 corrections to the report if possible, please?
Okay, go ahead, Claire.
It's on page 17 of the report, paragraph 36.
and it says that the IPCC says the IPCC reported on the effectiveness of global mitigation strategies in August 2021 and determined that, based on a range of modelling analysis, it is more likely than not that global warming would exceed 1.5 degrees by the middle of the century. When the report says, actually, under all scenarios, it is likely to happen in the early 2030s. Can we make that correction?
Members, okay, that correction? Okay, members. Okay, if
And one more.
Sorry, Claire.
One more.
Yeah.
And then again on paragraph 214 on page 68, it says further, the committee discussed the potential interaction of a newly established entity with the mooted creation of a local office for environmental protection, which is in the New Decade New Approach commitment. And I think that's just an error, because in the New Decade New Approach, it was an independent environment protection agency that was the commitment, and not a local office of the OEP.
Okay, you get Claire? Okay, members, members content with Claire's changes, and if you're content with the proposed amendments and Claire's changes, are members content that we publish the report, the bill report? Okay? Okay. Enough? Right. Okay, members, an amendment has been made to the summary report as requested last week, and this is on page 121 of the pack. And again, if you're content with the proposed amendment and the summary report to be published. Okay? Okay. Can I also ask members if you're content to publish the responses to the Climate Change number 2 bill in the call for evidence and citizen space? Okay. And okay, members, I want to thank members and very importantly the officials of the committee here and everyone who participated for the time and effort in progressing this bill. Okay, members, item number 6 on the agenda is the oral briefing on the 21 to 22 budget and the 21 to 22 budget and 2022 draft budget proposals. Page 127 of your packs are papers relating to the 21 to 22 budget and draft budget proposals for 22. These include a briefing memo from the clerk, which may be of assistance to the committee in our scrutiny of the proposals. The department has also provided a written briefing on its proposals for the January monitoring round, and this can be found at page 135. I'd like to welcome the following officials to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee. Roger Downey, Finance Director of DAERA, William Peel, the Finance Planning Accountant at DAERA, and Richard Macaulay, Deputy Finance Director at DAERA. If you give a briefing, members, and Roger, William and Richard, and then the members will want to ask some questions thereafter.
Okay, good morning, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, Roger, we got you.
Okay, good morning, and apologies that I'm not in a position to brief the committee on the budget 2022 to 25 this morning, but I am able to provide an update on the latest position with the current year 2021 to 22 budget. So as you know, the January monitoring round was undertaken in 2 stages, and you've already received written updates on our returns in both of those stages. The key points from both of these exercises were capital reduced requirements at stage 1 of 7.1 million and at stage 2 of 3.6 million. And this covered livestock, genomics, waste management grants, the AFBI research vessel and the rural development programme. We had a large capital transfer of 6.5 million to DFC for the COVID-19 Recovery Small Settlements Regeneration Programme. DAERA is collaborating with DFC and DFI to deliver this capital programme, which supports smaller rural settlements as they recover from the impact of the pandemic. The other main issue in this monitoring round was the avian influenza bid of 4 million resource tail. I understand the executive is due to consider January monitoring today, and we hope to receive formal confirmation from DOF in the coming days. This would allow us to finalise the spring supplementary estimates for the upcoming budget bill, and we propose to share that with the committee along with a new explanatory memorandum that DOF has asked us to prepare to help explain the movements between the main estimates and the spring supplementary estimates for committees. As part of the January monitoring round, we undertook a thorough exercise across the department to finalise our budgets and help maximise spend at the year end. Whilst this identified reduced requirements, it's preferable that this takes place now when the executive have an opportunity to reallocate funding across departments than in the last quarter when such underspends could be lost to Northern Ireland Bloc. As a result of the work done at January monitoring, we are now projecting to spend out on our resource and capital DEL budgets, and that is the focus across all business areas in the last quarter of the year. In terms of a breakdown of our resource DEL budget, the total is around 570 million, and the largest element of that is direct payments to farmers of 309 million. The next largest is staff costs in DERA of 144 million, with a further 18 million in AFPI. And other large amounts include TB compensation of around 26 million. On capital, we are due to have around 87 million at the conclusion of the January monitoring round. The single largest element of this is AFPI's research and development budget for staff and operating costs, which score in capital now in line with Treasury guidance. This is around 29 million. There's also around 19 million for digital transformation, 9 million from COVID schemes, although 6.5 million of this has been transferred to DFC, as already mentioned, 5 million for TRIPSI, and 3 million for the Rural Community Fund. And there's also a range of smaller capital schemes, along with around 10 million for a wide range of plant, vehicles, machinery, and other equipment right across the DERA and AFPI. As I've already mentioned, we are now approaching the stage where budgets will be finalised for the year, and the focus is now on spending them out in full. So, Chair, that concludes my opening remarks, and we're happy to take any questions on them.
Thank you, Roger. I suppose, Roger, you may have been listening in previously in the meeting there in relation to the 22 to 25 budget. What's the specific reasons why we can't get information on this here, so enable us to discuss that in more detail?
I suppose DOF published the draft resource and capital proposals, I think, in mid-December, and they were just agreed by the executive just immediately before that. So then we started working up detailed options on what this means for the department in terms of the efficiencies, the resource allocations, and the capital allocations, and where these could be made. I suppose this is a much more comprehensive exercise than we've had. I think since budget 2010 was the last time we had a multi-year budget, so that was 4 years. So this is a 3-year budget, and we haven't had one since then. So it's a much more comprehensive exercise than the annual budgets we've had for the last number of years. However, we did work up proposals with the top management team, and we got it agreed with them just before Christmas, and then we converted that into proposals for Minister on his return after Christmas. And but just as I've said, given there's a significant range of resource and capital proposals to consider over 3 years, it's now part of an iterative process with Minister, and unfortunately that hasn't concluded yet. But when it does, we will get the briefing to the committee as soon as possible.
Okay. And Roger, see, in relation to the 6.5 million that was transferred to the Department of Communities for the COVID-19 recovery small settlement scheme, have you any update on, obviously, how this has been utilised, and have you any, would you be in any position to be aware if there would be any additional funding for such a scheme? Because I am aware from various parts of the country that this is very popular, and that there are, there may well be waiting lists, and other more communities, more projects could benefit from it. I know it's went down well.
As I've said, this is a collaborative approach with 3 departments, so it's ourselves, DFI and DFC, and DFC are the lead in it. It's my understanding that we're all contributing equal money, so whilst we're putting in 6.5 million, there's a further 6.5 million coming in from DFI and DFC, so that's 19.5 million in total. And I suppose that's just for this year. There may be an opportunity to expand that in future years. I haven't seen what proposals have come forward from DFC or DFI as part of the budget process yet. But I suppose 19.5 million is a good start on this project, and we'll see what happens when that expenditure is incurred and what opportunities there are to expand on that in future years.
And just finally, before we move around the room, Roger, I just want to pick up on the Livestock Genomics project. There's 3 million, I believe, was allocated, and this was before the completion of the business case. How was this? How is this possible? Why was 3 million allocated before business case was completed?
Well, I suppose we work on the planning basis that they were going to spend 3 million this year, subject to business case approval. The indications earlier in the year was that would be the case. However, it's a fairly, I suppose, if we waited until all business cases were approved, then we mightn't have the funding in place. It might have been earmarked somewhere else. So at the early part of the year, 3 million was allocated. The business case was going pretty well early in the early part of the year, but it is a complex and it's a completely new project for the department. I know there's an industry stakeholder group involved, which is represented by the UFU, NIMEA, Dairy UK and LMC, and it had been progressing well, and it was only around September that it was first identified that there was going to be delays, and unfortunately at that stage it was too late to be factored into the October monitoring round. And if we had received that information maybe a couple of weeks earlier, we could have factored it in then, and then we mightn't have had to bid in such large amounts at October monitoring round, because we could have reallocated funding internally. But the slippage, I understand, is only I think it's 4 months. So whilst they were proposing to spend between December and April, or December and March this year, it's now slipping into the beginning of next year, and plans are in place to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Roger. Okay, I'm going to move around the room here. Harry, you're the first on the list here.
Okay, and thank you very much, Chair. And thank you again, Roger, Richard and William. Good to see you again. I'm just looking here. The bulk of the Rural Development Programme's funding in 2021 came from the EU funding. Is the Department assured that it will be able to fully deliver on its new rural development policy in the absence of this funding?
Are you referring to the reduced requirements that were given up in January monitoring there?
Yeah.
So that was as a result of a modification, so we could draw down more euros from Europe before the RDP 2014 to 2020 finishes in December 23. So there's still some euros in the pot, and in order to maximise that, we adjusted the co-financing rates. So there was more EU funding and less national funding. So that just freed up national funding from the executive, but the same amount of expenditure on the rural development programme was spent in this year as planned. It just meant that we drew down more from Europe, and then it meant we needed less from the executive, in which case we were able to return it to the executive to allocate it to other departments.
Okay, and moving on to Avian Flu, did you say there's a bid in for 4 million to cover that tragedy? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. 4 million resource DEL, and that's currently being considered by the executive.
Yeah, and is that what the expense is going to be, and will that cover it?
Well, I've been trying to get Robert Huey to give me an exact answer on that, but unfortunately we don't know how the avian flu is going to progress. There was a number of outbreaks, I think, in late November, beginning of December, but it's been a bit quieter since, but it could flare up. So that was him and his team's best estimate, and we're going with that at the moment. and we think that's reasonable. There hasn't been, as I said, there hasn't been an increase in outbreaks since, but it could flare up again as we go. I think the season continues through February and March and possibly into April. So we just have to be alert and react to that.
That's right, Roger. Indeed, as you say, we're very thankful that there haven't been any other outbreaks, and we are mindful of the farmers and the flock keepers that have went through very difficult times, and we'll not forget them. So appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Right, all right, William? William?
Okay, Harry touched on what I was going to ask actually in relation to avian flu and the 4 million resource bid for that. Are you aware of what it has cost to date to compensate for the number of outbreaks there has been? Do you know what the cost has been?
I don't have the firm costs in that. Some of them are still being worked up in liaison with the businesses that had incurred the outbreaks. So the Robert Huey side of the house are liaising with the people affected. So we don't have full costs on that at the minute, but they are pulling that together.
Well, no, okay, no, I welcome that bid. I mean, it's important that we help, that the department helps those that are affected in whatever way they can, because not only is it an issue in relation, they do get compensated, of course, for the boards, but they then have no income for a period of time, so it can be very challenging for any business in that situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. See here now. Just lost me. Get back into the WhatsApp here. John Blair.
Chair, thank you. Can I thank the officials as well for the information given. My question's around the funding for the Green Growth Project. We're informed that hundreds of millions of pounds were bid for in relation to that project, but there are indications that significantly lesser funds will be made available in the forthcoming years. The obvious question is, of course, was that funding related to actions required under existing green growth strategy, forthcoming environmental strategy, and also obviously the climate bills which are coming forward also, and what impacts will be if that funding isn't secured?
I suppose that relates more to the budget 2022 to 25 exercise, and I can come back and address that those questions in full when we come back and briefing on that, and we know where Minister proposes to allocate funding over the next 3 years on that. I'm proposing to bring Aaron Wright from the Green Growth side as well along to that, so he would be able to provide more detail on those questions. But I suppose the focus today is just on the in-year position in 2021-22. But I'm happy to come back and brief the committee on those questions whenever we've firmed up the position for the next 3 years.
Happy with that, Roger, and thank you. When that information is being brought to us, it would be useful for me at least to include that apart from the multi-year aspect of it, in the initial year 22-23, which we're about to enter, if there are any immediate impacts on any of the strategies I mentioned, and of course any potential impacts on the necessary climate action legislation also, if that's okay, specifically on those. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, see who we have next now. John Rosemary. Rosemary?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for the delivery of that, inform us about the budget. My question is on Project Stratum. 7.5 million was allocated to the Department for the Economy following the June monitoring round. Are you aware, has that been fully utilised, and do you think it will enhance the rollout of the project, so that hopefully a lot of rural areas will now be covered and there will be no more problems or issues in relation to broadband?
I suppose, yes, you're quite right. We had 7.5 million in the capital budget at the beginning of the year, and that was transferred to DFE at June monitoring. DFE is the lead on this project, so that 7.5 million would have been added to whatever capital allocation they had allocated internally to themselves, and that will be part. I think we're a smaller part of a much larger capital pot because they're the lead. It's my understanding that the 7.5 million has been used to go towards that project this year, and there are plans to add further allocations in future years. But in terms of the detail on rollout, I suppose that's more of a question for the Department for the Economy, because they have the teams in place that are rolling it out on the ground.
Yeah, no, what I'm hearing, there are still some really remote areas that are still missing out. So hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully there'll be enough money in the pot to go round to them.
Well, yes, I know, and we are looking at contributing more over the next 3 years, and I'll be able to confirm that when I come back to brief the committee on the budget.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Rosemary. Philip?
Thanks, Chair. I had a couple of questions on the avian flu and the broadband rollout, but they've been asked. But in terms of the 3 million for the genomics project, the livestock genomics project, I'm kind of noting that the Department for Finance have sent an email just in relation to the business, the money being allocated prior to the business case being approved, and saying it's kind of bad financial practice. So it would be interesting just to hear the department's position on that.
Well, I suppose we knew the business case was in progress. We would, I suppose it's an indicative allocation internally, that if we didn't want the project, and there's a number of projects that are at various stages across the department at all times. Some have are going through the business case process, some are about to complete, some have just started. And if we're fairly down the road that a business case is due to be completed and incur expenditure, we don't want to stop it. Once they've gone through that challenge of getting the business case cleared, but they can't start immediately, and that adds further delay, because you're probably aware this project's been at the creation stage for a number of years. So I suppose earlier in the year we thought that there was a good chance that this would take place this year, and we would get it kicked off straight away, because I know there's a lot of interest in the industry for this, but just due to the complexity and the fact that it is completely new, it hasn't been able to start this year. And I suppose if the delay had started, if the delay had been uncovered early in the year, the expenditure, the slippage of 4 months, might have happened from, say, I don't know, June to October, and that would still allow expenditure to be spent in the later part of the year. But because the delays started later in the year, it means the slippage has fallen into the next financial year. So it's always a bit of a balancing act around this, because we're constrained by financial year budgets. So we try to manage that as best as we can. And I suppose if we had heard a few weeks earlier, as I mentioned earlier, that this delay was going to happen, we could have reallocated instead of bidding to the executive for funding at October monitoring round, and that could have all been managed internally.
So because some of this is maybe a bit technical confusion, but essentially you've lost the 3 million because of this.
Well, there's the 3 million will now can't be spent this year and will slip into next year. I suppose what I'm saying is, if we had found that out a few weeks earlier, then instead of bidding, because we bid for 8.6 million capital at October monitoring, so if we'd known that this 3 million wouldn't be expended then, we might have only had to bid for 5.6 million, and we could have used that 3 million internally. So we wouldn't have had to, because we've bid for 8.6 million in October, and we've given back more than that in January monitoring. And if we had some of these slippages flagged up earlier, then we could have avoided that, and we would just be giving back a net amount of 2 million in January monitoring. And that's something that we've engaged with all the grade 3s with since then, to make sure that this doesn't happen going forward. We get this information in a more timely manner.
And I mean, in terms of the information, I mean, I suppose, is it not just common practice? Like, is it not something that the department should have known and been able to have dealt with sooner?
Well, I suppose, yes, we try to be as proactive around these things as possible to tie things in with monitoring rounds. I suppose the October monitoring round, although we return it to DOF in October, it's a bit of a misnomer for business areas because they do the work on it in August. So in August, they thought things were going on track, and that's what was reported back to us. And it was only then when it went into later September that they realised that there was going to be delays, and then that was then factored in, after the October monitoring round return was finalised. So there is a timing issue, and I fully recognise we need to improve on that, and there's been discussions with the grade 3s on that to just as part of a wider piece to ensure that we manage that better next year and beyond.
Okay, I mean, I suppose just finishing off, I think it is disappointing, and certainly I think lessons need to be learned, because I mean, it is a loss of 3 million, and I suppose that's unsatisfactory.
Yeah, and I suppose that's why there's two stages to the January monitoring round. Normally we hold on and we just declare any reduced requirements at stage 2, but we flag that up to DOF as early as possible at stage 1, so that was at the very beginning of December, so that they could factor it into their workings, so that if there were other departments out there that could spend, that this was flagged up as early as possible. So but yes, for ourselves, it's funding then that has slipped into next year.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move round the room here now. We have got Claire and then Tom. Claire?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Listen, I want to go back just to the green growth strategy, if possible, please. And I know that Dara said that it was going to bid for 600 million. And apologies if this has been asked already. Sorry, my sound was dropping in and out. But Dara had said that they were going to bid for 600 million as part of the draft budget. And they've secured, I think, is it 137.2 million across the next 3 years. So is there any discussions about how you make up the difference there?
I suppose this is part of the budget 22 to 25 exercise, and we're still working through that as part of the iterative process with ministers. So I'm happy to come back, as I've already said, and I'm inviting Aaron Wright from the Green Growth side along as well, to provide a more comprehensive briefing once we've got the budget proposals finalised. Okay,
it's maybe just one more, maybe it's the same then. If there was the 18.8 million of resource funded allocated for the EU exit in 2021-22, is there any update on the use of that resource and any specific costs associated with initiatives to facilitate EU exit?
Well, that's essentially to cover staff costs, because there's been because following EU exit, agriculture, environment, and many other areas are devolved to Northern Ireland. So there's a much bigger requirement to take forward policy and programmes that were previously led by the EU. So and DOF have recognised that over this past number of years and allocated 18.8 million to cover staff and other operating costs to cover that. So we now have over the number of years we've increased our levels of staff that are working on the EU exit side, and it's my understanding that the full 18.8 million is projected to be spent this year on that.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folk, for coming and giving us your briefing today. But with regards to the budget, has there been any unexpected budgetary pressures that has come this year, apart from the money for the for avian flu? Has there been any other unexpected budgetary pressures that you didn't know about at the beginning of this year, either in capital or in revenue, that has hit the department?
No, we had I think we had some COVID bids met early in the year. I'll maybe ask William just to confirm that in a few minutes, just because COVID is an evolving pandemic, and I think we got some funding at maybe June monitoring round. I know at October monitoring round we bid for 8.6 million capital. 5.4 million of that was for the COVID-19 recovery small settlements regeneration programme, of which we've allocated, we've transferred that money to DFC, and we're taking forward that with DFI as well. There was also a 2.1 million bid for rural community schemes and a 1.1 million top up to the Rural Business Community Fund. So there was 8.6 million of bids we made in October monitoring round that we hadn't anticipated at the beginning of the year. And on you've already mentioned on the resource side, the avian flu, I think, was the only resource bid we met. I don't know, William, can you confirm if there was any more June?
There was, bids with 21 million of COVID funding provided, so it was 10.9 million resource and 10.1 million capital that we did get. So I think that's all that was apparent at June, Roger, yes.
Okay, thanks for that, William. So yes, there was, so in addition to the bids that we made at October monitoring round, and there was ones we made earlier in the year. Some of them were wrapped up in June. I think some of them might have been confirmed in June, but we had actually bid for them earlier than that. Because as I say, there's like evolving COVID exercises as money gets transferred from Treasury. But besides that, we've nothing further.
Okay, thank you. One other issue, one over TV is a big issue that we'll have to try and get a handle on. It's going on now for quite some years. I think if I picked you up right, you said there was 26 million went toward compensation for TB this year. How does that compare with, for example, last year? And as you look to go forward again into next year, into next year's budget now, how does that? Do you see that increasing, or do you see it staying as it is, or perhaps reducing, or where do you see that figure sitting?
Well, the TB compensation budget for or expenditure for last year was 22.3 million, so it is higher this year. So obviously the compensation budget is impacted by two factors. One is the level of incidence, and one is the market value of the animals. So I presume both of those factors are related into the reason for the increase this year. I suppose it's just to the nature of the disease. The levels of incidence go up and down over time. So I think this is higher than it has been in a while. I can't remember the trend analysis for earlier years, but in detail. But I think they were less than that. So you'll be aware of the proposals around TB going forward. and hopefully when they're agreed and taken forward, then they will have an impact on bringing down the levels of TB incidence. But it's I suppose that's in the hands of the vets. Will be taking that forward, so they're more experts in these sort of things than myself.
That's okay, thank you.
Okay, as I have no other members down here wishing to speak, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Richard, Roger and William, for joining us this morning and for giving us a briefing and for taking our questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move on, but just before we move on, I should have said at the outset that it was brought to my attention last night that the Year 3 pupils of the LLW class of the Demagog College are logging on to watch our committee proceedings here this morning as part of their studies to learn more about the work of the Assembly and the role of committees. So if you are all logged on, I just want to send a big shout out to the pupils and staff at the Demagog College who are logging on to watch us this morning. Hopefully you'll learn something useful here to benefit your studies. Okay, members, we're going to move on to item number 8. It's an oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation and Anglo-North Fish Producers Organisation Joint Fisheries Statement.
Chair, sorry, just we have the department officials briefing us on the Joint Fisheries Statement in the first instance.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that there. Sorry, we have an oral briefing, actually an oral briefing on the Joint Fisheries Statement and Common Framework from the department. And members, that's at page 144 of your packs, and the papers pertaining to the draft UK Joint Fisheries Statement, which is laid in the Assembly and other legislatures on Monday. And in a few moments we'll hear from the department, and this will be followed by a briefing from representatives of the fish producer organisations. And Nick, the clerk, has provided a written briefing paper on the key aspects of the draft Joint Fisheries Statement and some potential lines of questioning for the witnesses. And the briefing memo was at page 144 of your packs. I'd like to welcome the following officials to a meeting and invite them to brief the committee. There's Owen Little, the Director of Marine and Fisheries Division DERA, David Steele, the Marine and Fisheries Division DERA, Paddy Campbell, Head of Fisheries Policy and Grants DERA, and I'd like for you to give a briefing, and then the members will then ask questions thereafter. So you're very welcome. You're on mute, Owen. Owen, you're on mute. Having problems here, folks? Looks like the three are frozen. David's moving, but no sound.
It's not us, Chair.
Yeah.
Maybe David or Paddy might be able to make some opening comments, Chair.
Yeah. David or Paddy, can you hear us?
No, they're on mute.
David, you must be on mute. I can see you're speaking, but I can't hear. We can't hear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, we got you. David?
Right. Yes, it's David here, Chair, so I can certainly make some introductory remarks until Owen joins us. So I'd just like to thank the committee for this opportunity to brief you on the draft Joint Fisheries Statement, and at the same time to provide some detail on the related Fisheries Outline Agreement and the Memorandum of Understanding. But first, I'd like to take a moment just to set the scene, to describe how the Joint Fisheries Statement and the Fisheries Outline Agreement and the MOU fit into the wider fisheries management and support common framework, more easily referred to as the fisheries framework. This consists of the outline agreement, which summarises the framework, and a number of legislative and non-legislative elements. The legislative elements then comprise the Fisheries Act 2020, which the committee will be familiar with, and retained EU law, and both of those things set the overarching legal framework. There's the JFS itself, which sets out the joint policies that will guide the 4 fisheries policy authorities' future policy direction, and DERA is one of those authorities. And then there's the fisheries management plans, which will provide the delivery mechanism. So then on the non-legislative side, there's the MOU, which will set out the high-level principles for how the fisheries policy authorities will work together more generally, building on the current ways of working, and a number of operational agreements, which will provide business-as-usual guidance on how the fisheries policy authorities will work together on specific operational fisheries management matters. I'll turn now to the draft JFS, if I may, which, as the committee will be aware, was led in the Assembly on Monday past. It was also led in the UK's other legislatures at the same time, with the public consultation now running from the 18th of January through to the 12th of April. And I'd like at this point just to place on record our appreciation of the work done by the community of interest, the stakeholder group which advised on development of the draft JFS. That community of interest provided valuable input on the initial outline document, on the themed approach to the draft JFS, and was a key source of information and evidence gathering during the drafting process. This was all prior to the public consultation itself. First thing to say is that the draft JFS is a statutory requirement of the Fisheries Act 2020. It is a high-level statement which sets out the strategic policies that the UK's 4 fisheries policy authorities will adopt in order to achieve or contribute to the achievement of the 8 fisheries objectives contained in the Act. And those 8 fisheries objectives are key moving forward. It's these fisheries objectives that will be at the centre of our policy making and decision making, and which will lead to Northern Ireland having a successful and sustainable fisheries management regime. This, of course, should be beneficial not only to the fishing industry, the seafood sector, and indeed the entire supply chain, but it should also secure long-term benefits for the marine environment. So that's the goal. So members will have seen that the draft JFS places an emphasis on 3 main themes, and those are the protection and, where necessary, the recovery of fish stocks, a reduction in the effects of fishing on the marine and coastal environment, and support for a modern, resilient and environmentally responsible fishing industry. The draft JFS explains how the fisheries objectives have been interpreted and proportionately applied when formulating the policies in the draft JFS, and how it is proposed to make use of fisheries management plans to deliver those objectives. It also provides a summary of the fisheries objectives by policy area and sets out how the fisheries policy authorities intend to achieve those objectives through their policies. Finally, the draft JFS includes a list of the proposed fisheries management plans and the stock or stocks included in each plan. These fisheries management plans will set out a policy framework to secure the long-term sustainability of fish stocks. The next steps then. As I mentioned earlier, the draft JFS is now out for public consultation on citizen space. It will close on the 12th of April, and we hope that there will be a strong interest in it. We also look forward to receiving the committee's views once it has had an opportunity to scrutinise this consultation draft of the JFS. And just on that, the committee will be aware that the Fisheries Act provides for an appropriate legislative body to pass a resolution on the consultation draft, or for an appropriate legislative committee to make a recommendation on it. But this would need to be done during the specified scrutiny period, which, as the committee will know, is from the 18th of January through until the 25th of February. So after the consultation is closed in April, the fisheries policy authorities will analyse the responses, redraft the JFS as appropriate, and get the necessary ministerial clearances prior to publication of the JFS by the 24th of November at the latest, and that date is a statutory requirement of the Fisheries Act. Looking further ahead, the fisheries policy authorities will publish a report on the extent to which the policies in the JFS have been implemented and have achieved or contributed to the achievement of the fisheries objectives. This report will be led in the Assembly and in the UK's other legislatures every 3 years. It will also report on the extent to which the policies in the fisheries management plans have been implemented and have affected the levels of stock of sea fish. In addition to that, the fisheries policy authorities are able to review the JFS whenever they consider it appropriate to do so, or no later than 6 years from the date of its publication. So that's the draft JFS. Very briefly then on the Fisheries Outline Agreement and MOU, if I may. The committee received a summary note last month, which was in advance of receiving the full documents for scrutiny later this month or in early February. And we hope that the committee found that note useful. The Outline Agreement and the MOU will be high-level documents which are being brought forward in a broadly similar timeframe to that of the consultation draft of the JFS, and it's hoped that this will assist the committee with its scrutiny of these documents. You'll already have seen that the Outline Agreement provides a summary of the framework, and the MOU sets out how the fisheries policy authorities will work together. One of the important aspects of the MOU is the resolution of disagreements between the fisheries administrations on policy decisions. The process allows a disagreement at official level to be escalated to senior officials, and if not resolved, the matter becomes a dispute for consideration by the Senior Officials Programme Board and to the interministerial group if no resolution can be found. So that's the governance mechanism. So where possible, that mechanism seeks to resolve differences without involving ministers, and the aim is to consider these issues in a timely manner, depending on the urgency of any decision. The MOU is a living, working document, which will be reviewed as required to ensure that it's operating effectively. This includes the dispute resolution process that I've just outlined. Having said that, of course, fisheries management is largely devolved, and ultimately decision-making rests with each fisheries policy authority. In addition, the MOU will describe the existing operational agreements that are currently in place. Again, the committee will have seen from the summary note that these are the Fisheries Monitoring and Control Centre, Fish Export Service, and Single Issuing Authority. So, Chair, I hope that's given the committee a sufficiently detailed overview, and we're happy to take questions on the consultation draft of the JFS and the wider fisheries framework. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, David. I suppose there's a couple of things I want to just ask. See, given the fact that we're on an island of Ireland and we have shared waters, and we also have disputed waters as well, namely Loch Foyle in particular. I'm just thinking, how would this apply? Has there been any consideration given to our colleagues in the south in terms of this framework?
I could maybe take that one on first. Yes, the JFS, of course, is a UK-wide document and relates to the UK's waters. But you're quite right. In terms of what we have to take into account in the JFS, it's delivering the policies and functions. So all EU vessels, which will obviously include those registered in the south, will have to comply with rules or regulations applying to Northern Ireland's waters in which they're fishing. So the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is the agreement that has been agreed with the EU, and that establishes a framework for the UK and the EU to cooperate on the management of those shared fish stocks that you've just referred to, Chair. And the TCA, of course, has established a specialised committee on fisheries, and it's through that committee that the UK and the EU are able to engage on fisheries management issues of mutual consent.
And would, say for example, would the voisinage agreement continue to apply?
Yes, it would do.
Would. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to just check my list here. Okay, we've got Harry. Harry?
Thank you very much again, Chair, and thank you to David, Paddy and Owen. I'm just wondering, do you think that the the JFS provides an adequate framework to address the current and future needs of the local sea fish industry? Because, I mean, we do know that their needs are great. Business as usual isn't really good enough, and there's much room for improvement and expansion in the industry. Just wondering, so what's your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Again, Owen, if you're... I can't hear you there, Owen, but maybe if I just pick up on that one then, Harry.
That's okay, David, no problem. Thank you.
Yes, you know, we're satisfied that the joint fishery, this joint fisheries statement, it's the first document of its type, and will represent a significant step forward in our ambition to deliver world-class sustainable fisheries. It's going to commit the fisheries policy authorities to developing policies that will ensure a vibrant and profitable and sustainable fishing industry, and that all of that will be underpinned by a healthy marine environment that will be resilient to climate change. The JFS also sets out the fisheries policy authorities' commitments to continue moving towards an ecosystem-based approach, recognises that wild fish are a public natural resource and do provide significant benefits in terms of being a source of food and employment, providing ecosystem services and cultural and social benefits. It includes policies to support the industry to thrive, including on succession planning, promoting the consumption of locally sourced seafood, and support to adapt to climate change. So hopefully, Harry, you know, from that response, you can note that, you know, we feel that the JFS will be quite an ambitious document.
Good answers, and thank you, David. I'm just wondering also, what's your thoughts on the proposals of the allocation of UK-only fishing opportunities and a portion of these to devolved administrations?
There might be one more for Paddy, perhaps.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, Paddy, yeah, loud and clear.
That's a relief. Yes.
It is to me too.
I think I'm back wrong.
Yeah, well, I think you know, it's public knowledge the position of the Northern Ireland Minister puts on this issue of allocation of additional quotas within the UK. We have a relatively small fishery zone in Northern Ireland, so any method of allocating UK quotas based on the area of your fishery zone is going to disadvantage Northern Ireland. So we saw an adjustment last year where about 10% of the additional allocation was based on a geographical element, and you know that was great with disappointment by our fishing industry. Yeah. There's to be a consultation on allocation for this year. For 2022, which hasn't happened yet by the Secretary of State. Our position really hasn't changed. We certainly don't want the allocation to move more towards more of this geographical element. So at the moment, the distribution is mainly on recent historical track record, which, from our point of view, is better than the geographical adjustment. And a small element of based on allocation based on your geographical area. So that is our view, and our view hasn't changed. And we certainly don't want any further movement towards distribution by geographical area only.
Yep, that's okay. Thank you for your answers. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Harry? John?
Chair, thank you, and to thank the officials as well for the information given. The questions I'm going to ask were touched on a bit there in David's answers to Harry. Can I ask, first of all, on the mention of the successful and sustainable fishing industry, what steps will be built in to deal with current challenges around EU exit, for example, any market changes, and also then future challenges such as actions required to deal with climate change and climate action? That's the first question. I'll do them separately if that's okay with you, Chair.
Okay,
Yeah, Chair, can you hear me now?
Yeah, Owen. Yeah.
I apologise. For whatever reason, my laptop wasn't working, so I'm on the phone now. So fortunately, David and Paddy stepped in there and probably did a better job, maybe. John, I'll take this. I think this the JFS provides this high-level policy for us to work collaboratively across the UK to meet these challenges in the future. And we talk about sustainability. I think it's important, and the industry actually recognise this because I meet with them quite often, that for a successful fishing sector and to be sustainable, it needs to make sure that it operates in balance with the ecosystems and ensures that there's healthy fish stocks. So, this is the start of a journey as we become an independent coastal state in the UK, for us to actually look at the issues that affect us locally and how we're going to deal with them. And so, for instance, I would say that, and the committee will have seen this earlier in October 21, about the Department consulting on fisheries management measures for marine protected areas. And these management measures have been developed to achieve the conservation objectives for those MPAs while trying to support fishing at sustainable levels. And those measures are consistent with the objectives of the Fisheries Act 2020 and also the draft Joint Fisheries Statement, which I think is a very good sort of kind of baseline and foundation for us all to work to. And then, just moving on to the challenges to do with climate change. Everybody certainly in the policy side, in my team, and also in the sector, and also the NGOs, understand the significant challenge that climate change will be to the marine environment, and also the opportunities that there are in the marine environment for instance, blue carbon and coastal carbon stores, and also, if we get it right, the opportunities for moving forward for coastal communities to be able to leverage some of those blue economy opportunities. So, I think the JFS gives us that sort of opportunity to make sure that when we're doing policies, we can test them against those key objectives in the Fisheries Act and the JFS, and that we're not too far off, and we can actually move forward and make sure we are sustainable.
Okay, Owen, thank you, and thanks for joining me there just in time for my questions as well. I'm very grateful for that, Owen, and no disrespect to you, of course. But the next question's around steps to go. I'm aware that some of these the answers might become clearer as we go towards post-consultation stage, but I'm keen to know what consideration has been given to steps to tackle the issue of accidental bycatch and protection of sensitive marine species. There's reference to this in, if I can get the title right, Fisheries Act, Ecosystem Objective and Joint Fisheries Statement UK Bycatch Mitigation Initiative. Is there likely to be a Northern Ireland bycatch initiative, mitigation initiative also? And will that be something that is being shaped currently or likely to evolve as we go to a post-consultation stage?
Paddy, if you want to pick this up from the bycatch perspective.
Yeah, yes, John's question, the sensitive species that they're referring to in the Fisheries Act are not so much the commercial bycatch, but bycatches of things like dolphins, whales, seabirds, things like that. So we will be participating in the UK-wide bycatch initiative. So we'll be monitoring incidental catches and introducing measures as necessary to avoid them. There are things already that vessels have, things like pingers, for example, on large vessels, pelagic trawling, which is supposed to deter marine mammals from getting caught up. So we will be participating in the UK-wide scheme.
Okay, so thank you, Paddy, and there will be a Northern Ireland element to that then, that clarifies that. Finally, and it's a general question on the economy of our fisheries sector. Is consideration given not only to the overall contribution of the fisheries sector to the Northern Ireland economy, but to the very specific impact that the fisheries sector has on local communities in regional areas, Clokeil, Portavogie being obvious ones, but there's a very serious local importance and proportionality to the economy of this, and is that considered as planned or drawn up?
Yeah, John, I mean, I think the JFS is very clear about this is to assist the coastal communities across the UK, and it recognises that they provide a significant social and economic contribution in remote areas of the UK. And that includes, I wouldn't say Kilkeel's remote because the producer organisations bring me down there quite often. I'm getting to know that road. But I would also say that within Northern Ireland, we have published last year the Fishing and Seafood Development Programme, which recognises the importance of the fishing sector, seafood sector, aquaculture sector to Northern Ireland, and to particularly the South Down ports. And, aligned with that fishing and seafood development programme, you'll be aware there's a harbour development element of it, which is quite significant, or potentially indicative cost-wise, significant investment, which some of my team are working on at the minute, to push that forward. So I think there's a realisation at UK level through the JFS, but also locally we've been doing stuff concurrently before JFS has been released about making sure that the coastal communities are resilient for the future challenges and are in a position to realise the opportunities as well.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Owen.
Thank you, John. Claire?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that so far. And I suppose I'm looking at this, and we already know that in so many cases, not just within DAERA, but specifically within DAERA, there's significant differences between the available science and the amount of science necessary to make informed decisions. And the JFS then commits to using the available science to inform management decisions. So my question's really around what happens if there's insufficient science available to make those informed decisions, as we know is the case so often. And where do you feel is the biggest knowledge gaps at the minute?
Do you want to start that? And then
maybe if I pick that one up. Thanks very much, Claire, for the question. Yes, as I said at the outset there, Claire, the JFS will provide this framework across the UK's fisheries policy authorities to meet those 8 fisheries objectives set out in the Fisheries Act. And as you'll have seen, there's the scientific evidence objective, but also the precautionary objective and ecosystem objectives. And the intention is that the UK's fisheries policy authorities will continue to take an evidence-based approach to fisheries and aquaculture management, and will make full use of the best available scientific evidence, and that will also support the UK in continuing to meet its international obligations. So the evidence base, as you pointed out, will be key. It's fundamental to the policy development process. So that evidence base, the intention is to maintain it and indeed to enhance it, to support the fisheries objectives. So that's going to be achieved. That'll be achieved through targeted research and exploring other approaches and capitalising indeed on the outputs from other joint partnerships across fisheries, aquaculture and marine, such as with industry, academia and international partners. And the fisheries policy authorities have obviously been working together to review the UK's work plan for 2022, and that's our coordinated programme of data collection, which was published at the start of this year. And collectively, we'll be exploring further options to see if that UK work plan can be improved and in order to ensure that we meet those fisheries objectives.
What's those further avenues then?
Well, it's I'm not sure myself about the detail of it, Claire. That's more something that the scientific people have been working on in terms of the UK work plan. I don't know if Owen or Paddy can add to that.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say, Claire, is there's a lot of effort goes into the science to provide evidence for policies, and the UK Fisheries Science Advisory Panel that looks at these looks at the work plan, identifies, makes sure it's fit for purpose. The UK with representatives engaged in at the international level, European level, to make sure that we have got the available evidence to actually, be able to make informed decisions. And what I would say is, the JFS does set out a commitment to move towards an ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management, and recognises that wild fish are a public natural resource and provide significant benefits. So, it's in everybody's interest to make sure we have good science, to make sure that we can continue to have a healthy ecosystem that actually delivers for society and to the economy as well. And again, underlying the objective, and one of the key objectives is obviously the precautionary approach. And, the JFS commits the fisheries policy authorities to continue to apply the precautionary approach to fisheries management in accordance with what's laid down in the actual objective, and aim to fish within sustainable limits based on best available scientific advice. And where that isn't available, there's efforts made to close that gap.
And do you feel that you've got enough resource to do this within DAERA?
Well, I mean, what I would say is this is very collaborative in the scientific community for fisheries, because fisheries, a lot of them are migratory. They cross the boundaries of the different fisheries authorities. So we work very closely across the UK. So AFBI would be the key component for our fisheries input, but they work with their colleagues across the UK. So between all the and indeed across Europe as well, and internationally, the science community work together to be able to address these gaps and be able to build a picture so that we can actually make sure there's sustainable fishing and total acceptable catches are realistic.
And then I suppose then right in the case of the scenario for the potential, for example, the executive collapsing. Bit unheard of in Northern Ireland, but just if that was ever to happen, right? Can then the DEFRA Secretary of State consult with DAERA officials instead of a DAERA minister? In that case, so if you're going sort of international, European, DEFRA, AFBI, UK scientists, so if we were in the absence of a minister, can those links be done in order to keep moving forward on this?
So, Claire, I can only relate back to the previous instance where there might not have been an assembly, and I think there's a difference between the sort of some of the stuff that's actually more sort of routine, I'd say mundane, official science, etc. And I can't see any reason why that won't continue. And then if there's where there would have been ministerial input, I assume like in the last hiatus, that there'll be some sort of direction mechanism given to departments and civil servants to make sure those decisions can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Rosemary?
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, Rosemary, we got you.
Yeah, okay, right. Do you think that the JFS provides an adequate framework to address the current and the future needs of the local sea fishing industry?
Rosemary, I think it's a good start. It sort of translates the Fisheries Act 2020 and the key objectives or the objectives in that act, and that sort of kind of lays out how the UK and how the fisheries authorities within the UK are going to move forward. It provides a good grounding for all of us. It provides a good baseline to work from, and it provides a sort of common operating picture so that the four nations, as we work together, and I meet with the other nations every week, that we kind of have the same sort of we understand the intent from the Act, and therefore we're sort of on the same page. I mean, in itself, it is not the solution. It is sort of the high-level policy that frames how we will all work. After that, it's very much a lot of fisheries is very much devolved. So it'll be down to it'll be down to politicians in Northern Ireland to ultimately work out what's required and what needs to be done for the fishing sector and marine environment in Northern Ireland.
If I could just add to that, sorry, Rosemary. Sorry.
Okay.
Obviously, we've been talking about the draft JFS, but we shouldn't forget the fisheries management plans that will follow also, because they will be key to, as I say, delivering on the policies that will help us to achieve or contribute to the achievement of the objectives in the Fisheries Act. So there's already very strong collaborative approaches taken across the UK on these matters, and say the FMPs as a delivery mechanism, will bring fisheries managers, scientists, wider stakeholders together to address sort of common fisheries management issues, and will also provide the flexibility to work across those administrative boundaries to manage common stocks of fisheries. Or areas, and it'll also help us to develop approaches to the management of mixed fisheries and ecosystems to deliver that the sustainable outcomes that we're all aiming for.
So you don't think that there's anything that needs to be amended in relation to the JFS then in relation to Northern Ireland?
I don't believe so, Rosemary. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion at official level. The Minister has been briefed on it, and he's, obviously cleared the draft, and it's been cleared by other ministers across the UK. So I think there's been a lot, as a start point. I mean, there's a mechanism for it to be looked at and reviewed in due course, and to a certain extent, we're entering sort of new territories and new territory for a long time as an independent coastal state at UK level. And so, will things evolve, and, will we find that things need to be maybe a bit more focused on? Absolutely, I have no doubt about that. But I think when we look at the reports coming, of the performance of the JFS, etc., which will come to the Assembly in due course, we'll be able to highlight where we've learned lessons and where we can improve in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move over now to, we've got here, William, and then Patsy. William.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to Brexit and the opportunities and the challenges for the fishing industry, I see there's an agreement between the UK government and Europe for a 5.5-year grace period. Does that mean, in effect, that there has been no major challenges in the changeover from Brexit? Does that 5.5-year grace period mean that the fishing opportunities are similar to what they were before Brexit?
Well, first of all, Paddy, could you maybe just give some of the details about what actually the Fishers Agreement, as part of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, actually meant for increased quota during that period?
Yes. So within the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the fisheries part of it, there is set out there a transitional timetable for readjusting many of the fishing opportunities between the UK and the EU. So over that period that you talked about, the percentage share of a lot of those fish stocks will change in favour of the UK. As a result of that agreement, it means that we will still have shared access between the EU and the UK to each other's waters during that period. As far as the Northern Ireland industry is concerned, the benefits have resulted in, certainly if you take prawns, for example, in the Celtic Sea, our percentage, the UK share will go up from 33% to, I think, something like, off the top of my head, I haven't got the figure in front of me, it increases up to about 41% over that period, which is, 1,000 to 2,000 tonnes extra prawns to the Northern Ireland fleet. For the other stocks, the demersal stocks in the RSC, a lot of it is dependent on the state of the stock itself. So although the share might be increasing if the size of the overall stock is relatively low in tonnage terms, and that doesn't make much difference to us. But the big stocks that gain out of the Brexit agreement is the prawns and FROPs, and also RSC herring. So our share of RSC herring at the end of the period will be 99%, going up from about, I think it was 75% to 99% share in that stock. So those are the two major gains for the Northern Ireland fleet landing into Northern Ireland.
I just noticed here, after the 5.5 year grace period, it would be the negotiations will then be for an annual negotiation each year. Do you see any risk in that, or is an annually negotiated agreement satisfactory?
Well, we'll always, every year, we have to agree the size of the overall fish stock pie, if you like, between not only the EU but also other countries such as Norway and the Faroes. So those negotiations will have to happen through coastal state negotiations anyway to agree the overall amount of fish that we take out. If the agreement lapses, for example, then we're into trying to agree the shares on an annual basis, which over 80 to 90 stocks could be quite a torturous process. I mean, last year, for example, at the end of 2020, we were to get all the shares agreed. We'd hoped to get it done by the middle of, I think it was the middle of 2019, and they ended up, we didn't actually agree them until just before Christmas in 2020. So the risk would be that we don't agree the shares between ourselves and the EU. And in that situation, there's always the danger that either side will take the share that it feels it's entitled to, and you could overfish the total amount. So that is the risk.
So ideally, a longer period than annually wouldn't be ideal. It would be better that agreement could be made for a longer period, I would have thought. Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, we've had agreements with Norway, for example, Norway and the EU before, and you do occasionally get there are occasionally times when they can't agree the shares, but it's always better that we can reach agreement on the shares, and then people know for certain that we're not overfishing the stocks. But the time it took us to agree the fisheries shares last year shows you how difficult that discussion is.
Thank you.
Okay, and Patsy.
Chair, thanks very much, and gentlemen, thanks for your presentation. I'm sorry I've joined it a bit late, but I had other issues to deal with this morning. Just on a very basic thing, what I was looking at there was the document in regard to the FMPs and in regard and how they relate to the fisheries objectives. What's the thinking at the department around? Now I'm looking in order to run a business or whatever, you have to have something to sell. Now the sustainability of stock and access to those stocks of fish, and what's the developed thinking around the department that to ensure that the industry and indeed the ecosystem are sustainable and durable and last? Now these are probably issues that have taxed the EU and national governments for quite a while, those that have fishing fleets. But what is the thinking at the department around that as to how these FMPs would balance between accessibility to the fishing stock for the commercial interests and at the same time sustain the ecosystem in the sea?
Well, I'll start off, and maybe David won't come in later, but the Fisheries Act 2020 sets an ecosystem objective which seeks to balance the needs of the environment alongside ensuring a viable and prosperous industry to deliver sustainable fishing. So the fishery management plans will aim to continue following the ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management to ensure the wider effects of fishing activities in the marine environment are considered and minimised by fisheries managers, which should ensure healthy seas on which our fisheries sources rely. So I think this is about balance. It's about having the science to understand what's required. It's about working to mitigate and reduce the risks of overfishing. And I would give credit to our fishing industry in Northern Ireland because they've worked very closely to, for instance, to reduce bycatch of cod in the Irish Sea by employing selective, the gear trials and selective gear to eliminate that, so that they can actually then continue to still properly fish for nephrops. So the fisheries management plans identify certain stocks that are susceptible and need to be managed, and then the stakeholders will work to actually see how they can actually ensure that there's an ecosystem-based approach that protects the marine environment, plus also provides that sort of viable industry.
I would like a wee bit more, and maybe it comes for our next speakers, as to how that, number one, is delivered, and number two, overseen by the department.
Yeah, maybe I could add to that then, Owen. Yeah, it might be helpful, Patsy, just to sort of describe what the FMPs, these fisheries management plans, will do, what their key features are. So the intention would be that they would contain assessments of the health of fish stocks and the policies needed to restore or maintain stocks, at levels that are capable of supporting sustainable harvesting. They will also include steps to improve the data collection that was referred to earlier, and the ways to establish sustainable harvesting rates where that's needed. And crucially, of course, then they will also contain the policies and the management measures that will contribute to the fisheries objectives in the Act and towards achieving that sustainable fishing. And a lot of this takes us back to those 8 fisheries objectives that are in the Fisheries Act. There's an obligation on us now to make sure that in any of our policies that we ensure that they're achieving or contributing to the achievement of those fisheries objectives, and the FMPs will also include indicators then to monitor the effectiveness of the plans against the goals and targets. And in terms of monitoring, then of course there will be 3 yearly cycles of reporting. So there will be a report done not just on the draft JFS, but also on these fishery management plans in terms of how they are assisting with the sustainability of stocks and meeting the objectives in the Fisheries Act.
Okay, and getting that balance, if there is a balance between the sustainability and the economic viability of businesses.
Yes, that's the socio-economic aspects of it can't be overlooked. You're quite right. It's the overall aim here is to get a sustainable fishing management regime, but in terms of that sustainability, that has to encompass the economic aspects also.
Okay, thanks very much. Meantime, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Patsy, thank you. That's all the members that have indicated they want to ask questions. Can I just thank Owen, David and Paddy for coming along and giving us the presentation and answering our questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we're just going to move on. And the Anglo North Fish Producers Organisations on the Joint Fisheries Statement. So I'd now like to welcome representatives from both groups. Can I welcome Alan McCullough, who's the Chief Executive of the Anglo-North Fish Producers Organisation, and Harry Wick, who's the NI Fish Producers Organisation. You're both very welcome. Can I invite you just to make your opening remarks on the Joint Fisheries Statement, and then we'll move to members' questions.
Mr. McGregor, good morning, and thanks to you and to the committee for the invitation to provide the evidence here today. Harry Wick is just in the process of joining us. He had another important video call to attend to in respect of fisheries in the Clyde region in Scotland, so he'll be dialing in as we speak. Vice Chair, the Chair in opening the public session of today's meeting referred to the three pupils that were still hopefully listening in to this session and hope that they would learn something from it. And can I just add to that, because it's something for them to consider that as we look at the marine around Northern Ireland. The marine zone roughly equates to about 1/3 of the landmass of Northern Ireland. And of course, Year 3 pupils like the rest of us were listening in to COP26 before Christmas. And clearly the marine environment plays a very significant role in climate change, etc., going forward. So for students, young people today, what happens in the marine is vitally important, and we're delighted that they continue to take an interest in this subject going forward. Philip, like you, industry only received the consultation on the draft Joint Fisheries Statement 2 days ago. So we really haven't had an opportunity to go through the 82 pages with a fine-tooth comb and consider all of the detail. Nevertheless, we welcome the Joint Fisheries Statement. It's the culmination of a lot of hard work over the past 12 months. Harry Wick and I, through our partnership in the Northern Ireland Fishermen's Federation, contributed to some of the dialogue that went on. So we very much welcome what's there. And indeed, as we have considered some of the points contained in the JFS consultation, we come to the conclusion that we in Northern Ireland are actually ahead of the pack. And that's good news. And I did listen in to the questioning that your colleagues gave to the officials there over the last 30 minutes or so. Good questions, and again, some of the answers highlighted that Northern Ireland is ahead of the pack. And if I may just give a couple of examples on that, Philip. Some of the key draft policy areas include encouraging new entrants into the industry, and that's a significant challenge that we've had over the last time. So clearly, we share that as an objective, that positioning this industry right, that we can encourage Northern Ireland people on this island to pursue a career at sea and pursue a career in the fishing industry. Another key policy area is setting out the ambition that says to promote locally sourced seafood. Again, Philip, we've been doing that for some considerable time, and I know some of your colleagues in the Assembly frequently avail of some world-class Northern Ireland seafood. So we're already doing that. In terms of sustainable fisheries and the marine environment, we've talked a lot even this morning about the ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management. Actually, the Irish Sea, as far as I know, is the only sea area in Europe that has an ecosystem-based plan already drafted and ready to roll. And a lot of other sea basins around Europe are looking at what has been prepared for the Irish Sea and asking the question, is that something that can be applied to their areas? And when you go into the fine detail of the JFS consultation and to the annexes that contain maybe some of the fisheries management plans, it actually fascinates me that for a lot of the waters around GB, they're still looking at this issue as single species events. Now, single species is not the ecosystem. The ecosystem, Philip, is everything that happens in the sea, the food webs, all the dynamics between the various fish stocks. So it's actually encouraging when we look at the Irish Sea, we have in there what's called a demersal fisheries management plan. And that really reflects somewhat what an ecosystem-based approach should look like, considering all the commercial fish stocks and indeed non-commercial fish stocks that are in the sea and how they interact with one another going forward. There's a lot of detailed work still to be done there. There's a lot of challenges still to be answered. But again, I think we're a step ahead of the pack. And of course, the other one, I mentioned COP26, and that's the issue of mitigating the contribution to fishing to climate change. Again, I would suggest that we're ahead of the pack. And I'll give you two examples. There's the first one about the contribution that the fishing fleet mix to carbon emission. Now, of course, everything is evidence-based, and right now we don't have a baseline to measure the carbon emissions by the fleet. But with funding from the department, we have embarked on a project to get that baseline in place, so that with officials and with other partners, including the ENGOs, we can sit down in the future, look at the strategy that we need to put in place to reduce the carbon emissions by the fishing fleet. And of course, the other big issue is the blue carbon, and this is what's stored in the seabed and what potentially can be released into the atmosphere by fishing activities. Now, again, that's theoretical. We don't have any evidence. But again, in Northern Ireland, we're ahead of the pack. We've teamed up with Ulster University. We've now developed a partnership with people in Alaska and in New Zealand. And hopefully in the very near future, we're going to receive significant funding that we can actually embark again with our partners to get a baseline on what impact, if any, fishing gear is having on the seabed. Clearly, my hope is that we discover that it's not contributing to the blue carbon issue. But on the other hand, if it is, it gives us the baseline from which we can then devise policies and strategies that we can address that challenge. So we welcome again the Joint Fisheries Statement. We welcome the consultation. We will certainly be responding to the consultation when we've had a chance to consider it in detail. But certainly over the last couple of days, as we've had read it, Philip, we certainly believe that Northern Ireland in many ways is ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Harry has joined us. So Harry, you're very welcome. If you, I think you may well have caught the majority of what Alan was saying. So if you have anything to add just before we start taking questions.
I echo and endorse all of what Alan said. That's very, very true. The maybe slight bit of balance I would add to that is the statement is short on specifics. And whilst we welcome, these big sentiments and this general direction of travel, of course, the devil will be in the detail, and that's where we really need to focus our attention when the opportunity comes. But for now, what's been published or what's been pushed out for consultation is very broadly welcome.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to start going around members who've indicated they want to ask questions. So Claire, you're first.
Thanks very much. And good to see you again, Harry and Alan. Good to hear from you. And delighted that you're mentioning COP, and I know that you're doing so much work and you need an awful lot more resource to move forward as well. I'm sort of going back to what I was looking at with the officials when they were there as well, and within the JFS, it's that issue about committing to the available science to inform decision making. And that's always been a problem for us. But I'm wondering, just in your view then, do you feel that we have sufficient science? And where do you feel for yourselves that the big gaps remain?
Well, I think the simple answer to that, Claire, is no. There isn't enough science. And the big scientific challenge, as I see it, is managing the transition from single species management to ecosystem based management. This will be something very new for almost everyone in fisheries management, but new to us in Northern Ireland, and really gathering the science to support ecosystems based management and ensure that is actually an effective tool and we're getting it right going forward. That's going to be a big priority for specific science for our fisheries in the Irish Sea. Other areas where there's concern for science, I think, are around climate change issues. So as Alan's already alluded to, there is a body of thought that says gear interaction with the bottom may release carbon. We don't know that for sure. It's filling that evidence. And I think that this is very bold for the industry to go down this route, because we are taking a gamble here. We might not get the answer we want, but we are committed to behaving responsibly. So we go and ask the question. Fingers crossed, we do get the answer we want and the actual impact is minimal. But if it isn't, there will be implication for us, and we're inviting that on ourselves. So really, that's a reflection, I think, of our commitment, that we're prepared to take a chance, we're prepared to roll the dice on the outcome, knowing that we may not get what we want. In terms of specific gaps for science, there is a carbon issue, there is the ecosystems management issue, but really it's the big ask for science, as far as I'm concerned, is that we need to move away from the whole idea of single species management, and that we have only one lever to control the management of species, and we pull on it a bit. If that doesn't work, we pull on it harder, and then the risk is, if that still doesn't work, we pull on it so hard that it breaks. There isn't just one lever. There's other options, and really it's the attitude towards science that needs to change just as much as the science itself, and embracing the fact that actually there is more than one golf club in the bag here. There's more than one way we can do this.
Claire, if I may come in on the back of that, it's number one, it's good to see you again. And of course, we were lucky enough to have you down and with us at the coast, socially distanced, of course. And you were able to see for yourself, like, some of the work that the fishing industry has been doing. I think it was John mentioned earlier in his discussion with officials the issues around accidental bycatch, and the officials gave a good answer. Like John, you've been able to see the work that the industry is pursuing here in Northern Ireland on the highly selective gears that officials referred to. And that project has been ongoing for 5 years. So we do take these things seriously. The other question, Claire, you put to the officials was, does DAERA have sufficient resource? Now, down to DAERA to answer. But really going forward, what Harry and I are keen to pursue with DAERA and our other partners is the team approach. Northern Ireland isn't that big of a place. I think what we've identified as we've spoken with you, as we've spoken to other ENGOs, that we've actually got many issues in common. And that's why since your visit, the first thing that we've done is actually, and thanks to the funding that DAERA has provided, we have employed another young man to support our efforts in the field of science. And that gentleman is pursuing the projects we referred to earlier on the issues around carbon emissions from the fleet, the management of plastics in the marine environment, and of course then the issues around blue carbon. And we want to build on that going forward, and we believe with a lot of sympathy within DAERA and certainly with the Minister to build on that and create what we christened a marine hub, that not only industry but ENGOs and other partners can sit round, identify the challenges for Northern Ireland PLC, get the evidence and pursue solutions.
It's very impressive, and I'm delighted to hear that you've got that staff resource to begin all that work. That's great. It was an interesting discussion that we did have. But I suppose then I'm wondering, so this report's really focusing on that eco-based approach, and maybe just pushing that a wee bit more. Do you feel, and obviously we have to move in that way, and that's, well, in my opinion, it's a good thing, I think, but do you feel that we're ready? Are you adequately resourced to move from that species-based management, or that single species management, into the ecosystem management? And then maybe my last one to you is, you know, what have you any sort of figures in your head about what type of level of funding that your sector will need to make that transition, that carbon transition for your fleets?
Yeah. If I may, Claire, first of all, on the ecosystem approach, again, as it related to earlier, I think Northern Ireland, the RIC, which dominates our fisheries, is a step ahead of the pack in terms of developing the ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management. Over about the last 4 to 5 years, international fisheries scientists have been working under the title of WK Irish Working Group Irish, and that has been specifically developing an ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management in the RIC. I would commend the fisheries scientists that they involved industry in their deliberations, and that, I think, has produced dividends. It's always far better to involve the people that are going to be mainly affected by these plans rather than come and tell us what we're going to do. So we have a plan in place. again, we're ahead of the pack. That's not to say that we don't, as industry, still have some questions to ask as to when ecosystem-based management is applied to fisheries, what, if any, impacts it will have on different quotas for different species at any one time. And of course, like the issue, and it's actually one of the issues that we're dealing with in that area of the Clyde. We've been dealing with top-down approach in terms of the management of the cod stock in the Irish Sea and the Clyde for the last 20+ years. And people can debate if it has worked, if it's staved off something worse, Claire. But through the WK Irish process, what the fishery scientists resolved was that actually the measures that the industry have adopted, some of which were very painful, were the right measures and are still the right measures. And possibly the reason some fish stocks, predominantly cod, possibly the reason maybe it hasn't recovered as quickly as was hoped, is actually nothing to do now with fishing pressure, and it's more to do with the climatic influences that we all know and debate. So yes, the industry has its contribution to make, but I think broader society needs to think about the contribution that can make too, Claire.
If I can add one point to that, Alan, I think our willingness to embrace ecosystems management is another testament to our commitment to environmental responsibility, because actually the indications from AFB scientists, certainly in the informal discussions we have, is that actually, the first thing that's going to happen when we move to this approach is there may well be a reduction in fishing opportunity. So, we're perfectly willing to accept that in exchange for what we hope is going to be a more sustainable and environmentally positive future.
Great.
And sorry,
just
sorry,
the last.
Very sorry, we didn't answer your question about funding. Like the DAERA officials, as we speak, are currently drafting a strategy for future funding, which we hope will become available from the middle of this year. Clearly, we look forward to them consulting with industry about that strategy, but we sincerely believe from our early dialogue with officials that that's going to provide and at least go some ways to providing the needed resource to deliver on all of the issues that we're discussing with you today.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you guys, and Harry, thank you very much for that answer. By the way, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm delighted to see that you, as the head of the industry that you're in, that you're taking that approach and having that level of thinking. That if you do have to reduce the stock that you get, that you're absolutely seeing that the economic policies and resourcing has to come from rewarding you, I suppose, incentivizing you for doing other good work. And I think that maybe others within the department could start to learn that from you too. I think, yes, there's another example of how you are leading the way. I think that's great and well done.
Thank you.
Okay, Claire. Rosemary.
Thank you. My question's actually in relation to the young entrants into the industry. You talked about methods of encouraging young entrants into the industry. Then, on the other hand, you have spoken about a reduction in the fishing, a reduction perhaps if we're going to perhaps support the climate change issues. There could be a reduction in fishing opportunities. So how are you going to marry the two? And secondly, how will you encourage the new entrants if this is what they see as their future?
Well, Rosemary, if I'll start the answer to the question, if I may, like in the consultation for the Joint Fisheries Statement, it focuses, amongst other things, on training, which is essential in the sector. And that is something that both organisations here in Northern Ireland are already heavily involved in. Ensuring that we are providing, first of all, the mandatory training that is needed before anybody can go to sea, as well as the supplementary training to allow young people to pursue a long-term career in the fishing industry. Getting back to your specific question, the two issues to me are totally linked. Bottom line is, Rosemary, that if we don't get this right as industry, we don't have jobs. And it's as simple as that. So as we look to the challenges and indeed the opportunities that are contained in the Joint Fisheries Statement, We need to embrace the ecosystem-based approach that we've been talking to Claire about. We need to take maybe some further pain. There will be a consolidation in the fleet, Rosemary, but that puts us in a position, I hope, where we not only have a more sustainable industry, but a more economic, profitable industry. And that is the bottom line for attracting new recruits really into any occupation. I think the challenge that Harry and I have right now is that it's very hard to explain to a young person that they should pursue a career in fishing when a lot of the time they can actually make more money stacking shells in Asda. So the two issues are linked. If we don't get this right, we don't have a job. It's in our interest to get this right. It's in our interest to look to consolidate the fleet, and in doing so make a more profitable fleet that will attract the new blood that we really yearn for.
If I can perhaps, Rosemary, talk a little bit about some of the specifics of what we do. Certainly, a young person wants to join the fishing industry, we will actually pay their salary for their first trip at sea so they can get an idea of whether they like it or not. And that allows fishing vessels to take on young people with no financial risk to themselves. If that young person does like it, we will then pay for their mandatory training courses that will allow them to go to sea and work on that vessel. When the time comes that they want to take the step up to become the skipper of a vessel, we will make a significant contribution towards their training costs. We'll do that again when they want to get the next highest level of qualification. After that, should they wish to make the jump to vessel ownership, we provide interest-free loans. As now we can't afford to do it to buy them a boat, but we can certainly help them out financially to get the deposit together to go to the bank with a package and get a boat. And once we're that boat owner, we will supply them with quota at effectively rock bottom prices. So when you look at, for comparison, some of the species in the North Sea, it costs more to rent that quota than the market value of the fish is worth. Whenever organisations such as Allen's and ours rent it to our members, it is about 3, 4 or 5% of the overall running cost. So when I say we provide it for buttons, we quite literally do. So it's by having that package, having that career structure in place, that's how we hope to attract people to the industry. When we talk about quote opportunities potentially reducing in the short term as we embrace ecosystem management, well, I would take the view that that's perhaps short-term pain for long-term gain. And if we are to bring people in, young people in, it is the long-term prospects that we hope we're going to be able to sell it with, not the short-term obstacles to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. No, that's very welcoming that you have those stages of support and progress to encourage the young people, because so many other forms of employment have difficulty attracting young people now, especially where they're working a longer day, perhaps working weekend evenings that are not just as popular. So I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Rosemary, just if I may, just go back to the question, the very good question that you asked officials earlier on. That I think it was along the lines: does anything need to be changed or amended in the draft statement? I'll say again, we've had this for 2 days, and certainly as industry, as I'll repeat what I said earlier, we welcome it. But we're looking forward to going through this in detail. And then we'll see if anything needs to be amended.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Harry Harvey.
And thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Alan and Harry. And it's hard to beat a Harry, especially with a beard. So, listen, thank you. First of all, we talked about being ahead of the pack. And first of all, what we really want is for our fishermen to be ahead of the pack. And that's in terms of catches and sales. So I'm just wondering, a wee question would be, what's your thoughts on what the recommendations might be when you'd be thinking of carbon emissions by the fleet? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, how you're thinking of that would be reduced. Thank you.
It's a very good question, Harry, and something that the Minister recognises as well, that really we have an old fishing fleet in Northern Ireland. So in many ways, the ability to modernise what is an old fleet can be reduced simply because of the construction of those vessels. Nevertheless, that's not to say that there are possibilities for short-term modernisations. And we think about the engines, we think about the possibility, and Harry and I have been talking to people earlier this week, fitting devices to the engine to actually inject hydrogen into the filters, which reduce the emissions. It's about fitting devices around the propellers on the boats, which make it more efficient, which again all helps reduce emissions. So it's incremental steps for the old vessels. And then in the longer term, of course, the aspiration that we share is for a fleet of modern vessels. That may be what is tradition in Northern Ireland to buy second-hand hulls from other parts of Europe that we can modernise to meet the most stringent conditions that we have now in carbon emissions, or ultimately building new hulls. And in doing the latter, that then fits onto the shore side of the industry that we mustn't forget here in Northern Ireland. Everybody quite rightly focuses on what we're doing at sea, but we have a very expert and a very valuable shoreside industry that can build boats, can fit boats out. So we're excited about the prospect of potentially building what we've christened a pilot boat, Harry, with the latest technology, possibly hydrogen. But of course, when we consider all of these things, we need to look at the infrastructure behind those aspirations. And at the minute, whilst we might aspire to having hydrogen power on fishing boats or buses or anything else, there remains the issue about the supply of hydrogen.
No, excellent answers. I really appreciate that, Alan. And I mean, when you mentioned the emissions and you mentioned efficiency, reducing emissions not only helps the reduction of carbon, but it should also help the fishermen themselves, because generally when something's efficient, it's costing less to run as well. So that certainly would be a good thing. I just wonder, was battery power ever considered, especially for those not going too far out to sea, or has that not been experimented with yet? Just a thought. Thank you.
That is being considered along with a range of other things. Like there's a lot of innovation in terms of hydrogen battery. I hesitate to say it, but some people maybe jokingly also suggest that maybe we should go back to the days of sail. But I think that's maybe some ways off. So yes, but again, when you're building a boat and you design a boat, you need to consider the weight of the batteries. But that's not to say that it can't be done. And like there are some big ships at sea that are operating with batteries. So all these things are very much in an experimental stage, and we're right to trial them. Other people have built hydrogen-powered fishing vessels already. Some people will suggest to me that we need to wait here in Northern Ireland to see what somebody else is going to do. Neither Harry, Wick or I are in the place that we wait on anybody. We want Northern Ireland to be in the lead. We have the right people here. We have the right companies, we have the expertise. There's no reason why we can't be in the lead.
Excellent answer.
If I can add to that, Harry, the fishermen themselves are very much behind this, and the department as well. I am very encouraged by the conversations I have with them about our new funding model and how within that funding model there will be quite large provisions set aside for the reduction of carbon emissions and or to meet our own environmental responsibility ambition. So it's a really joined up approach. And if I can give you one example of about how positive fishermen are about it, when we were looking at the back end of last year about how we could potentially spend the wee bit of money that was left in the pot for fisheries funding, Alan and I went out to our members and said, guys, what are your suggestions? And one of the suggestions that came back and received a lot of popular support was actually for a little wind turbine to add to the vessels to reduce costs and to reduce our overall carbon footprint. So the fishermen themselves are very much coming into this space as well. And I'm really excited about how it all looks like it's there, the opportunity for us all to progress together on this front.
Excellent and brilliant answers, and I'm absolutely delighted that the fishermen are on board, if you could use that term. Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Harry. John?
Chair, thank you. Alan, Harry, good to see you as ever, and thanks for the answers and the information you've given us so far. Very useful indeed, and delighted to hear of the environmentally focused work that's going on there. I don't want to repeat anything that we've covered already, so I'm going to ask very briefly, and I think I know the answer already because you heard the presentation earlier. I referred in one of my questions earlier to the UK Bycatch Mitigation Initiative. I'm assuming that you're already on board with that, aware of it, and working your way through that with a view to similar schemes in Northern Ireland.
I did hear the exchange with officials, John, and it was a good exchange. And again, and John, you and the other committee members are going to have to forgive me for continually using this term, we're ahead of the pack, because I sincerely believe that we are on these issues. And with all due respect to what's in the Joint Fisheries Statement or the draft JFS, I sincerely believe that we are ahead of any aspirations at the UK level. I think there's a problem that we have in Northern Ireland too much, that we hide the good work that we've been doing under too many bushels. Like we as industry, we continually look at ways of changing, modifying, amending the nets to avoid any sort of a bycatch. And that was probably formalised, as I mentioned earlier, about 5 years ago, when, thanks again to funding from the department, we were able to employ a young man who has spent the last 5 years working with fishermen, trying to find that silver bullet. And there isn't a silver bullet, John, that can apply right round the UK, because every region is different. People are fishing for different species, they're working on different grounds, they're maybe using different sorts of sizes of fishing vessels, so there's so many factors. And that's why then, yes, the UK aspiration is good, but then we need at a regional level to be given the opportunity to find our own silver bullet.
Yep. And on that sort of Northern Ireland bespoke work that's required, it sounds to me from what I've heard already, the discussions around the fleet, for example, that there needs to be some joined up work in there by the Department for Economy as well as DAERA, because there are clear economic aspects to this also. The next question is a very separate one. The department officials mentioned earlier the potential investment, Alan and Harry, and we've talked about this before, the potential investment for the harbours and ports and the upgrades that are required there. Could you give us any information with regard to if we're further on that one?
Well, you're right, John. And like the question that you asked of officials earlier about the impact on local coastal communities was spot on. They answered and referred everyone to the Fisheries and Seafood Development Programme. And again, there's a lot of background to the FSDP, as it's known in the sector, that I'm not going to bore you with right now. We don't have the time, John. But the FSDP was published in May of last year. And amongst the things it looks at is significant investment in the port infrastructure here in Northern Ireland. Investment of just over £100 million, with the bulk that focused on a new outer harbour in Kilkeel. Now, to build that sort of site, John, creates a considerable footprint. To me, we've been quite honest about it, the funding is the least of our worries. It's the planning and the environmental considerations that we need to take into the frame. And certainly for the Kilkeel project, and indeed the ideas and the projects for Ardglass and Portavogie, as those have been promoting the ideas, we are very, very keen to build into the infrastructure any mitigating measures that we can come up with that will reduce any environmental footprint. So for those that are concerned about the planning issues, let's get on with it. Let's give us the opportunity to come up with the proper design. And in that sense, we were heartened to hear, Harry and I were heartened to hear yesterday when Minister Poots visited Kilkeel, that the FSDP has been progressed to the stage now where they are with CPD about to tender over the next number of months for an integrated consultative team, which will look at the design and look at the other detailed environmental impact issues around this. So it is progressing, maybe for some people too slowly, John, but it is moving in the right direction.
If I can add to that, John, Portavogie is the smallest project out of the three ports with a recommendation for a £5 million spend. but the actual there's a fund in place, so the UK Fisheries Fund, which is part of a £65 million UK infrastructure investment programme. So there are bids being drawn as we speak for Portugal to apply against that fund to meet its elements of the FSDP. So the FSDP hasn't sat on the shelf. It is moving ahead, and we're thrilled about it.
Okay, thanks both.
Thank you, John. William?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, and thank both Alan and Harry for coming along again. They're always good advocates for the industry there. In relation, I know that the industry has a number of challenges, and like all sectors and all industries, there are certain challenges. What do you see in the short to medium term as the biggest challenges that the industry faces?
An excellent question, William. I'm tempted to pass it right away to Harry, but that's unfair. Harry can think about it a bit more. I think, William, we've touched on a lot of the challenges already. We discussed with Rosemary the issue about new entrants to the industry. That's a significant challenge. Right this week we have other challenges, and the phrase, I think it was Harry coined it when him and I were chatting about it last week, is that right now we feel surrounded, and the reason I say that is because we've been dealing with an issue this past week in the Clyde, where regretfully the Scottish Government, following a consultation, made an announcement that came as an utter surprise to everybody, not just the fishing industry here in Northern Ireland, but that in Scotland too, which effectively will close the Clyde to all fishing operations from the 14th of February through to the 30th of April. So that came as a surprise. That's on our north flank. On our southern flank, and I think it was the chair mentioned earlier, the issues around the all-island status and the Bycatch agreement. The Bycatch agreement is in place, but regretfully, the Northern Ireland fleet is still excluded from Irish waters between 6 and 12 miles. And over the winter months, that is where the Kilkeel fleet fish. And unfortunately, we've had a number of trawlers tied up in Kilkeel since last October. Very unfortunately, one of them has decided, even over the past week, as they look at what's going on north and south, that their best option is to retire. So we clearly, and I get it, William, both Harry and I are coming across optimistic in this call. I am optimistic. I really sincerely am optimistic about the future of the industry. But I have to be honest and say that if you were down on the quaysides in Portugal, Glass and Kilkeel today, the optimism is certainly challenged. Again, to coin that phrase, we feel as if we've been surrounded.
And certainly, I have very little to add to that, but perhaps to look a little further into the medium term. Alan and I have very clear ideas about where we want to be in the medium term in terms of modern vessels, in terms of a more balanced age profile throughout the fleet. I think the specific challenges in getting to the medium term are going to be around how we make that transition. So how do we make the transition from a fleet ownership model where the majority of vessel owners are in their 40s to 50s? So how do we bring that ownership profile, the age of that ownership profile down? And how do we also bring the age profile of our vessels down, allowing them to be more efficient and perhaps, although the RSC is very, very positive for us in the summer, in months that are outside of the summer, winter months, how do we transition into a fleet that's capable of searching out those opportunities further afield? So those are big challenges in the medium term.
Thank you. Well, at least, as Alan said, it's good to be optimistic. I think in any industry you need to be optimistic and go for the positives, and wish you well in the future.
William, if I might just come back to that, another very good question that your colleagues asked of officials earlier on. Your question was about the share of the quota. And of course, 12 months ago, you and your colleagues will remember that Harry and I were lobbying you about that very issue and our concerns that Northern Ireland, our legitimate share of the quota was going to be undermined. Now, the reality is that following Brexit, every fisherman has benefited from an additional share of quota. Sometimes it's hard for them to see, especially when they can't fish and can't catch that additional share. But it was a one-year deal last year, William, and we are anticipating that the Secretary of State, George Eustace, will be making a determination very soon on what the deal is for 2022. And clearly there's a fear that he will further erode any Brexit dividend that has come to the fishing fleet in Northern Ireland. On the other hand, we've been told quietly that there may not be any change to the deal that was made last year. That wouldn't surprise us because the other devolved regions in the UK, or the other regions in the UK, certainly got more out of it than what Northern Ireland did. So it's in their interest not to change it in some ways. But I've seen figures that as we head to the end of the 5.5 year period that you were referring to earlier, that actually when you take everything in totality, William, the existing quota that we had prior to Brexit and the new quota that we have after Brexit, that actually in 5 years' time that Northern Ireland's share compared to the other regions in the United Kingdom will actually be lower.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that's all the members who've indicated that they wanted to ask a question. So thank you very much, Alan and Harry. As always, it's been interesting.
Philip, just before we stop, could I take this opportunity to extend an invite to the members of the committee to come and visit us in one of the ports? We'd be delighted to run through some of the initiatives we're planning in a little more detail.
Okay, thank you. We will discuss that, I suppose, later on when we're talking about our forward work programme. So thank you very much for the invite, Harry.
I think if I may just add to that one, Philip, that there's a long-standing written invitation in from the Northern Ireland Fishermen's Federation, and of course that has been stymied by COVID. But hopefully in the weeks we can get that action, please.
Indeed. Okay, thank you. Thanks again, gentlemen. Thanks very much,
everybody.
Okay, so just moving on then to item 9, so written briefing on the single-use carrier bags charge. So members, you'll recall from last week's meeting that these regulations were deferred until this week as there was a number of procedural matters to be clarified before the examiner of statutory rules could report. So the examiner has advised the clerk that the regulations necessitate a cross-community vote, and as such will need to be laid again following consultation with the Department of Finance. So once due process has been undertaken, the examiner has given an assurance to expedite the referral of advice to the committee. Okay, so number 10 then, written briefing from DERA, the edible crabs order and amendment. So at page 22 of your packs is the Examiner of Statutory Rules 8th report. Members will note that the Examiner has no comments to make in relation to the proposed rules, which are subject to the negative resolution procedure. So therefore I will put the following questions to the committee. So that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered Statutory Rule 335/21, the edible crabs undersize amendment order NA 2021, and has no objection to the rule.
Great.
Okay. Second question then, that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered Statutory Rule 336/21, the edible crabs conservation amendment regulations NA 2021, and has no objections to the rule. Okay, nobody has objected. So just moving on then, number 11, the Spring Traps Approval Amendment Order 2021. Members, the Examiner of Statutory Rules has confirmed that this will be included in a report which is due to be published on Friday. So I therefore ask members if they are content to defer its consideration until we have the Examiner's comments. Okay, thank you, that makes sense. So item number 12 then, the Clerk's written briefing on the Women in Farm Management mini-inquiry. So members, you'll remember, or just by way of update rather, that on our mini-inquiry into women in farm management, the online survey closed on Friday evening. We received 187 responses to the call for evidence. The next stage of the inquiry will be to engage with stakeholders, and the committee clerk has provided a briefing paper at page 233 of your packs, which outlines proposals for the event. So, Nick, I'm just going to ask you if you want to brief the committee on this.
Chair, thank you. Yes, indeed. It's just by way of update and reminder to members that as part of the forward work programme and the committee's investigation into the barriers facing women in the local agricultural sector, that we had intended to facilitate a stakeholder event on the evening of the Thursday, the 3rd of February, in a couple of weeks' time. So in the memo provided in the packs outlines a proposed structure excuse me, and running order for the event, which we would plan to hold on a fully virtual basis via the Zoom platform beginning at around 6:30. And a proposed running order is outlined below that there would be a short welcome and introduction, which would include an overview of the format and the housekeeping arrangements by our colleagues in the Assembly Engagement team. We would then propose, by way of introduction, provide an overview of the committee's investigation and its intent and some of the preliminary findings from the survey responses. The proposal would then be that we would split up for approximately 45 minutes into 3 or 4 separate virtual breakout rooms to discuss 3 questions relating to the committee's investigation. And as anticipated, that within the groups we would have committee members, committee staff and staff from the Assembly Engagement team to help facilitate. And we would also use within the breakout rooms the Mentimeter app, which members may recall we used with some success in our stakeholder event that we carried out last June with members of youth organisations on the climate change bill. After we've had a period of time to discuss the questions in the breakout groups, the proposal would be that we would come together and facilitate feedback and wider discussion in a more plenary style environment before wrapping up and closing. So overall we would plan for the event hopefully to last about an hour and a half, so from about 6:30 to around 8 o'clock. And the proposed questions that we would seek to explore in the breakout rooms are suggested as follows. So question 1 would be, what do you think are the top 3 challenges facing women in the local agricultural sector? I suppose that's put forward as a suggestion because we know from our initial findings that there are of course lots of issues that have been highlighted, and it's unlikely that there will be sufficient time to explore in depth all of the range of issues. So we thought it might be a good suggestion to ask groups to prioritise. The second question then would be for the groups to consider what do you think needs to be done to address those challenges. And lastly, how can greater support for women in the agricultural sector help the agricultural industry meet its overarching strategic challenges. In terms of our invitees, it is hoped that we would have around 25 participants during the event, and respondents to the committee's online survey will be asked for expressions of interest to participate. So we would like to allocate around 10 to 12 places for members of the public who have taken the time to feedback via our survey. And then in addition, we would propose to seek representatives to attend from following organisations, including the Ulster Farmers Union, the Northern Ireland Women's Rural Network, Young Farming Clubs of Ulster, the Rural Community Network, Equality Commission, Rural Support, Professor Shorthall from Newcastle University, who has undertaken research on this topic area, and lastly, officials from the department. So that's a quick summation of the proposals for the stakeholder event, and happy to take any questions or comments on that as needed, Chair.
Yeah. Thank
Chair,
you.
if I could, please.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I know there's one organisation that's based here locally in Cookstown, is NIFPO, that maybe represents another farming interest or farming interest as well. It might be useful to have included in that.
Yeah, this is the stakeholder event for the,
yeah.
I think that would be important. That would be very relevant. Patsy, thanks for that suggestion. I also want to take the opportunity to thank all of the people who participated in this survey, and all of those who promoted it as well, and again the officials in the committee here for collating it, because I think it's a very important piece of work, particularly now at a time whenever we are the department's engaged in drafting a new rural and farming policy here for the north. I think that that's timely, and I think it's important that the information coming from this here is used to try and shape that policy appropriately to make sure that women have their fair place, in the policy and indeed on the farms and in the communities. So I think this time is very good. So I want to thank people for taking part. Okay.
Chair, can I just make a wee
yes,
small point on that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And like, I'm just looking, 25 participants. I'm saying, I mean, we're talking about women involved in farming. I would take it that the majority of the participants would be ladies. Would that be right?
Nick?
Chair, yes, indeed. So, Harry, I would imagine so. So we, out of the 187 respondents to our survey, 181 were women, and so I mean, it's going to challenge my maths to do that off the top of my head, but that's well over 97% of the respondents were women who live, work in the agricultural sector.
Yeah, brilliant, very good. That's okay. That's all. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Harry. Okay, members. Okay, members, we're going to move on down to number 13, correspondence. It's page 276 here, PACS. Response from the Department regarding the ongoing queries with its projected cost of achieving net zero by 2050. The Department has been in contact with the CCC to seek further information and has indicated that it may be in a position to update its draft regulatory impact assessment in early February 2022, subject to any new information provided by the CCC. Members okay to note this correspondence? Members, 283 in your packs, there's a reply from the Department following our request to consider submissions made by the trade unions in respect of the proposal to dissolve the Agriculture Wages Board. The Department acknowledges the strong divergence of views amongst stakeholders on this matter and that it will not be possible to reconcile these. The Department indicates that the Minister intends to set out policy proposals to Executive. The agricultural workers should be subject to the same protections as in any other sectors of the economy. Members, any comments or suggestions to make in relation to that? Okay. Members, at page 334 for your packs, the response from the Department regarding the questions on the future rural development policy and function of the new Rural Stakeholder Oversight Committee and its subgroups. The Department has provided draft terms of reference for the rural stakeholder, the new Rural Stakeholder Oversight Committee, which includes its intended membership, role and function. The Department has also pledged to adopt learning from the previous Rural Development Programme and the Leader Programme into the Rural Policy Framework. Members, any other questions relating to this particular piece of correspondence? Can I ask the question? I note that the Department is saying that they'll adopt learning from the previous RDP and Leader, and I suppose that one of the guarantees, one of the things that I'm probably most concerned about is getting assurances that grassroots communities will have their say in the development of local policies and strategies. And whilst the organisations listed, are strategic right across the north, I would be concerned that policies could be delivered and developed at a very high level, and not getting the input from local communities. Because I know that local action groups were much wider and much broader, and reached out to every community across the north. So I just would like to seek ongoing assurances that how actual local community organisations are guarantees that local community groups will actually have their say in terms of developing local strategies for the rollout of a new rural development programme. Okay. Members, okay, we action the correspondence suggested an index sheet, the remainder of it. Okay. Okay, for our work programme, I want to refer members to the draft for our work programme at page 365. I seek agreement for this. Okay. Okay, members. Under item 15, any other business, you'll be aware that the committee has engaged with the Department, DEFRA and the Home Office regarding the ongoing staffing crisis in the pork processing sector. In his most recent correspondence, the Home Office outlined that 800 temporary short-term visas have been allowed for foreign pork butchers to enter the workforce. The Chief Executive of the NI Pork and Bacon Forum has advised that the committee team that the industry is under increasing pressure, leading to potential animal welfare issues and economic uncertainty for farmers. Are members content that we invite the Chief Executive to brief us on the ongoing pressures and the seemingly intractable difficulties in finding a resolution? And Thursday, the 3rd of February, would appear to be the most convenient date at present. Are members okay we can action that there? Yeah. Philip, are you looking in? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, William. And Philip. Yeah, William?
Yeah, you're okay, yeah. I was just going to raise a very same or similar issue. I mean, I had a pig farmer on to me just this morning. Big backlog of pigs building up on the farm. The pigs then get overweight. Then the factory cuts some overweight pigs. It was some of the factories, and one in particular, I think, is doing like Saturday kill, and they charge £52.50 per pig for killing on a Saturday. So that's almost 50% of the price of the pig. We're just killing the pig on Saturday. So on top of that, then they're penalised for overweight, which is beyond their control because they can't get them off the farm. So it certainly is a big issue.
Thank you, William. That can be reflected in our correspondence to the forum, and Thursday, 3rd of February would seem to be the date that's most acceptable, suitable at the minute. Philip?
Chair, thank you. Kind of on a similar issue, I'm not sure if it can be tied in, but I mean, obviously it's in the public domain that Moy Park has ceased processing at their Ballymena plant, and one of the reasons that they said for this was not being able to get staff as a result of Brexit immigration rules. So I'm just wondering, maybe the two can't be tied together, but if they can't, if we separately could maybe write to Moy Park and the department just in relation to a similar, the similar issue within the poultry industry, because it's obviously, Moy Park's I think the North's biggest employer, so this is obviously a major concern.
I think Philip should we include the Home Office maybe and deference as well, given that one of the reasons cited was the inability to access labour.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Members, are there any other business that you want to do before we go into? Sorry, Rosemary. I've just seen the message there now. Sorry, Rosemary. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would like to reiterate what Philip has said there in relation to Moy Park, and especially they also cited, as you said, they had difficulty getting workers. So I could concur and support what Philip has asked for.
Thank you, Rosemary. Patsy?
Yeah, Chair, just following on from that, and I was following very closely just the issues at Moy Park, but they aren't the only particular location where labour is becoming a problem. So it might be helpful, I don't know whether we can get this through DAERA or DAERA in conjunction with the Department for the Economy, to just establish if there's a clear picture emerging of difficulties. I know the construction sector, I know hospitality is affected by labour shortage, but just to get a clearer picture as to where the major pinch points are and difficulties are around this, particularly with labour.
Yeah, right to the Department of Economy.
If DAERA keeps an eye on this, that's grand, that's good, but I would reckon they'd probably be collaborating with their colleagues at the Economy on this matter. Absolutely. Just to get some sort of a clear picture as to what the major problems are. We're all picking it up anecdotally, and we've seen the stuff that's been mentioned about Moy Park at Ballymena there. But if we could just get somewhat a clearer picture, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, Patsy. Thank you for that.
Chair, just on the back of that one, if we are going to be writing, would it be maybe useful then to write to both DAERA and the Economy and ask them how they're working together on this, or are they working together, or do they have a joint plan to address the issue?
Yeah, that's noted. It'll be in the correspondence as well. Thank you, Claire and Patsy. Okay, members. Okay, members, we're going to have a closed session now just to discuss some issues around the TB strategy. But the date and time of the next meeting is next Thursday, 27th at 10 a.m. A hybrid meeting, and again streamed on the Assembly website. So we're just going to have a closed session now to continue our discussions on the proposals for TB eradication strategy. So thank you very much, and thank you for anyone who's been listening this morning as well.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.